So this little curly-haired cutie is me at around 3 or 4 years old. These outfits that we would wear in holiday photos soon in our family became known as our picture dresses because they would last, especially on me, about as long as it took to take the picture. I continued to take pictures for my mom. And she's here today, by the way. I love you. She, loved that and bribed me with candy to sit still long enough to smile. And I was happy to do so. But something interesting happened around this age, around 9 or 10 years old. My friend's parents would come over to the house and see these pretty pictures of us standing all around the house, and they would say things like, "Oh my goodness, you're such a cute little girl," because normally I would dress like Hercules and wear camo and things like that, and they were kind of surprised when they saw pictures like this of this little angel on the wall. And I distinctly remember around this time that I would get hand-me-down clothes from two of my friends that were girls, and I was in her bedroom and just trying on one of her pink t-shirts that had a little heart on it. And her mom came in and just for 5 minutes gave me praise for just simply as something as simple as wearing a pink t-shirt. And I remember distinctly the image of me smiling in the mirror because it felt great. I mean, other people affirming me in some ways, and adults that I respected and I knew cared about me, but I started to internalize that message like, wow, something as simple as a little pink t-shirt with a tiny heart can get me to smile. And brace yourself. I would consider what happened over the next coming years me taking it to the extreme. This is me competing in Miss Ohio, USA at 19 years old. And this was the ultimate attempt at seeing if I could sustain myself by the external praise and affirmation for my femininity, when internally I definitely felt a sense of masculinity, and I used this to really hide and press down any internal sense of who I really was. And after this, I didn't compete anymore, and I basically threw up my hands because there was nothing else I could do to prove to myself that praise for my femininity was gonna be sustainable when internally I was so much more aligned with my masculinity. So luckily, there was something I found out around this time, that there was something I could do. I could take testosterone, I could get some surgeries, and I could then get this man in front of you to actually be a reality and match my internal sense of self with how everybody else saw me, but this time it would really be for me. So I was excited. I was excited when I had the vision of myself as this person. I'm still looking down like, whoa, okay. Like that I could be this person here. And in order to gain access to medically transitioning through surgery and hormone, you have to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Sounds fun, right? And so not only do you have to meet the diagnosis criteria, which are generally pretty benign. It's okay, you have to feel like you identify with a different gender for a period of more than 6 months, and it has to cause you a significant amount of stress. I started to wonder, okay, I don't really follow the narratives, which I wonder how many of you have heard in one way or another that being transgender is feeling like you're born in the wrong body, that you hate your body, that you feel like you're trapped in the wrong body. Yeah, those were the narratives that I had up until that point. And I started to question, was I really transgender? Was the sense that this would allow me to just simply be more of myself, was that enough? And I reached out to a doctor, and I asked him, I said, this is really how I feel. I feel like this would really make me feel more complete. But to him, simply feeling like this would allow me to be more complete wasn't enough. I didn't match his stories that he had heard about what transgender people are supposed to look like and sound like. And so I had to start telling the stories like, I've always hated my body since I was 5, and I really hate my body now, and I need to transition. And that is the lie that I had to tell when really, internally, I was so excited there was something I could do to align my internal sense with my external expression. And even in my own community, honestly, giving this talk, I'm more afraid of the backlash within my own community than I am of anyone sitting in this room that's not a part of the trans community, because even in my own community, if you tell a narrative that is outside of, I've always hated my body, I have gender dysphoria, and you internalize that, you get ostracized. And gender dysphoria to me, it was really, I did have anxieties and fears about transitioning. I was scared of how other people would interpret me and my body after I transitioned. I was afraid that if I came out as transgender to people, that they would treat me differently. And I started to internalize other people's fears as my own, with the only narrative that I had had up until that point, which is you're transgender, you have gender dysphoria, you're supposed to hate your body, and that's it. And I internalized, as I said, other people's fears as my own. So this is me, excited, 1 month on testosterone. And this is me about 2.5, 3 years into my transition. I had had a beard, I had had my chest surgery. This is me on the beach, shirtless for the first time. And it was peak experiences like this that I had been really, really looking forward to. Okay, I'm on the beach, I'm shirtless for the first time. Great. But the problem was that I was still deeply unhappy, and I didn't understand why when at the beginning of my transition, I was so excited, and I knew that this would allow me to have a greater sense of completeness and wholeness. And at this point in my life, as much as everyone else had already seen me as Ashton, as this person, I questioned, okay, what is it? What's next? I scheduled myself to have the next surgery. The next step would be to get a hysterectomy. And then I could pursue lower surgery. But I got brutally honest with myself in my room one night before a few weeks ahead of my surgery, and I thought to myself, okay, is what I really want yet another surgery when every other person already sees me as Ashton? Or what I really truly wanted was to just figure out what it meant to be happy, really. And the reality was, no one was coming. Unlike other diagnoses that you get with gender dysphoria, no one was coming to say, okay, now you're cured, go on and live your life. I had to get to a place where I had to decide, okay, this is enough. My body is enough. I have now have permission to be happy. Ultimately, beyond that, I was hitting snooze on my life. I was hitting snooze on every other aspect of my life because the focus up until this point for 3.5 years into my transition was just the body. When the body gets, aligned, everything's gonna be good, perfect. And gender dysphoria, dysphoria is in the name. It was a great excuse to push down other ups and downs of life, normal sadness, depression, anxiety. I was just hitting the snooze button on those. I'll deal with that when my body gets aligned. I'm transgender. This is supposed to be a difficult time in my life, and I was not practicing any skills of how to cope. I was not practicing any acknowledgement of other things going on in my life that were difficult during this whole process. And unfortunately, 41% of transgender people, including myself, have attempted suicide. And it wasn't at the beginning of my transition. It wasn't when I was considering coming out. It was 4 years or more into my transition that I hit a brick wall, because I realized, as I said, another surgery wasn't going to give me this alignment that I felt with more than just my body. And I had to then deal with and cope all of the things that I had been pushing down and snoozing for that amount of time. And I actually started numbing all of these feelings with, it's a little bit more acceptable at my age, but partying, alcohol, marijuana, things like that, numbing those feelings. And when I could no longer sustain that, I did end up in the hospital for attempting suicide. And obviously 41% of transgender people attempting suicide is not working. It's not working. And I think about the 15-year-old kids that are coming out as transgender right now in this time. And I think about the narratives that they have that are so stagnant, that don't tell the whole story. And I worry for them, because I think of the pain that I experienced in the amount of time it took me to acknowledge how I really felt about this process. And if I could save just one kid that's coming out, the unpacking of all the things that have been stuffed down because of the convenience of something like a narrative of gender dysphoria, then that's why I'm talking here today. So it is time for a new narrative. So I went back to that initial excitement that I felt when I knew that this would just allow me to be more of the person that I already was before I internalized all these fear-based limiting beliefs about how other people would interpret my body. And I gave a name to that. I called it gender euphoria. But I put a little playful twist on it and spelled it Y-O-U, and it was really just for myself. It was something I just reclaimed for myself, because I stopped identifying with the narrative of somebody that has gender dysphoria. I realized that what I wanted was not just to transition, it was to thrive in all areas of my life. And it wasn't just about transforming my body, it was about transforming every single aspect of my life. But the soil that I was feeding my transition process was gender dysphoria. And the plants that rose from that narrative were that of just more gender dysphoria. And I know that the second that I decided to flip the script, change the narrative, I gave myself permission to be happy and allow myself to lean into what it felt like to be present in my body as this person, no matter what next change that I needed to have physically. It wasn't just about the body. It was about aligning my mind, my body, my soul, my spirit, my internal sense of self. And ultimately, it's you that have the opportunity to write your own narrative, even if it's authority that is telling you you have to adopt this narrative, or even if it's your own community that's telling you there's utility in adopting this narrative. If we tell a different narrative, we're going to stop being prescribed these medical treatments that greatly affect the quality of our life, but it's just not a story that's working up until this point, and it's really our choice in order to reclaim a narrative, and it can be playful. We can re-engineer, reinvent anything that we want. It's up to you. So, thank you.